through who we have with us today. We have David Latton, Head of Global Indirect Procurement and Supplier Diversity and Equality at Logitech. He's our first guest. We're also joined by David Cho, a second David, Chief Procurement Officer and Managing Director at University of Massachusetts. And finally, we have Melissa Warnicki, Vice President, Head of Sustainable Procurement at Aon. Hi, how are you all?
Hello.
Well, thank you for having us.
Jolly good, and thanks for joining us today. We've got plenty to get through on this panel, so I will get started nice and quickly if we can, because there's frankly so much to dig into on this particular subject. I'll put this to all of you first, and I'll go from the top left on my screen with you, David Cho. For you, what really inspired you and the organisation at Massachusetts to really get into this supplier diversity programs, and what benefits have you seen?
You know, I've certainly heard of many reasons folks are motivated to see growth, support supply diversity programs, but for me, it's simple. A couple of considerations. One is from a balance of trade standpoint, you know, our key constituents are students. They're diverse, and UMass usually strives to represent the broad cross-sectional part of our society, and who we conduct business with is certainly an area where we want to match that intent and value set. Secondly, time and time again, innovation comes from so many places. So diverse partners come with very different points of view, and when it makes commercial sense, that divergence creates some really cool outcomes. So certainly, I'd say that it fosters innovation. You know, in terms of benefits, you know, the increased diversity spend that we're seeing has definitely resonated with our communities, and frankly, that balance of trade with a broader mix of our constituents mean a lot to our students and locks us in closer to the audiences we serve. I just want to say, let me caveat: if I met another obnoxious, bald Asian American business owner, I don't think I'd be compelled to promote that business, but because there's only room for one of us right now. But laughs aside, it's a terrific initiative that I'm seeing so many progressive procurement leaders are pushing for. So it's great to be part of this panel. Thank you.
And David Latton, same question to you. What was the inspiration for you and to be involved in this, and well, also to develop it, I suppose, as we go along?
Yeah, one similar point to start with, similar to David over at UMass, is that it's very much strongly belief-driven for us at Logitech. We're a global company, a very global company, serve communities across the globe. It's really important that our supply base reflects that diversity. So I think that's one of our beliefs. And I think a real catalyst for us was 2020. The year of disruption for all of us, the unequal impact of the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, etc. And that really made us look at ourselves and that belief is codified as equality as one of our core values at Logitech. And I think 2020 really made us think, are we doing enough towards that value? Bracken Darrell, our CEO at the time, hugely passionate about it, asked that exact question, and I think the answer was clear. The answer was no, we weren't doing enough. And to be fully transparent, back in 2020, only 2% of our US spend was diverse, and we had zero Black-owned businesses in our supply base at the time. I'm glad to say we've changed a lot since then. I mean, as hopefully people can sense, that was really the answer to that question, are we doing enough, really was pretty strong. No, we weren't. We've done a lot since then. And I think I'll talk about the benefits before I get to where we are now. I think the benefits from it, because it was such a core value of ours, and it really was such a strong sense of, wow, we are not doing anywhere near enough here. It really raised the strategic importance of procurement with our C-level leadership. Supplier diversity is a really powerful lever to grow partnership with procurement across our business. And, you know, that has all sorts of benefits, of course. It means you're getting a lot more spend under management, all the usual KPIs. But going back to my core point, we want our supply base to reflect the diversity of the communities we serve. It wasn't, but now we have that real connection with our business. We've dramatically grown our diverse supply spend. It's over 10% now in the US. So it's really elevated the function, but it's elevated that we're aspiring to live towards that value. And there's a lot more we want to do, of course, but it's been a really journey in those last 3 years that we were nowhere near where we wanted to be, and we're getting there now. But it really was that 2020 moment for all of us that changed it.
David, I really enjoy your sort of I guess humility is the right word in there, to be able to look at things and want to change them. Melissa, I'll come to you last on this one. For you, where does that motivation come for you to be such a passionate advocate for this?
Sure. So I think, both Davids actually, mentioned some of the key areas that we have been focused on as far as serving our communities, ensuring that we're enabling the economic inclusion within those communities, I think is extremely important. Aon has been focused on supplier diversity, really over the past decade, and has continued to try to drive and increase our utilization. For us, it's not only about our internal procurement needs and evaluating and identifying diverse suppliers that we could be working with for internal purposes, but also our clients are demanding and asking us, how can we drive and expand supplier diversity? And so one of the things that we are actually doing is including diverse partners as part of our business solutions back to our clients. And so it really kind of enables that full circle of, utilizing diverse suppliers. And so I think that's been a really important motivator. And it's also a lever for innovation and how we can better serve our clients and our colleagues. So I think that's been, some of the motivation, and also I think some of the benefit as well.
Now, I'll put the next question out to all of you, because do you all feel it's gone from a situation where looking for these diverse opportunities was a nice to do, it was something nice to mention in a report, it's gone from a nice to do to an essential, to something that should be hardwired into every business?
So I think one of the important things that we learned, as part of some of the social unrest, was that it's really important to be focused on some of these things that are part of your core values when no one's watching, right? And I think that was one of the things that we could point to and talk to colleagues about, that, maybe we hadn't been emphasizing as much. We were working with diverse suppliers, historically, and we just had not been maybe sharing it as much as we should have been. And so, at that point, we were able to really engage and really make sure that, colleagues have an understanding of our program, our focus. And, so I think that was one of the important parts of this is being, genuine with colleagues. And I loved what David had mentioned too, is that transparency is really important, because if we're not measuring it, we're never able to improve, our results and where we want to be focused.
If I could add to Melissa's point, at UMass, we launched this procurement function in January of 2020. It's a centralized shared services environment. So it's a young function. And one of the things that we realized was that the definition of value, the key term that we need to weigh in when choosing our partners from even a policy standpoint, didn't include supplier diversity. Now that's a key criteria. So that's certainly an initial point of success. And going back to your question, it's now part of the day-to-day business. So we're tracking how many competitive processes, and we usually have, the UMass system has about $1 billion in annual expenditures. There's anywhere from 70 to 120 competitive processes in flight. And having supplier diversity now as part of the evaluation criteria and ensuring that weightings are used to factor that in, that's definitely something we wanted to see as part of the math used in considering partners, which is a bit more subtle, but it certainly encourages that growth and is part of the standard operating procedures in how we institutionalize partnerships.
I think just to round off the trio, I think my point on your really good question would be that we're getting there. We're certainly getting there. I think the moral and ethical case for this has always been obvious, of course. the business case for it, if you care to read the research, has been very strong for a long while too, around the best performing companies do have some good gender equality at leadership level. They do have diverse teams. So that's really good. I think what we've been lacking, and the environmental issues have this a lot already, is that urgency. And I think the real tipping point, and what our consumers, our customers, and other network partners of ours can give us, what we can give as procurement supply diversity people, is we can drive that urgency by challenging our suppliers on that. I think it's so obvious it's out there. I think the urgency is what we can really drive forward.
What I want to dig into next is something a couple of you have touched on briefly, is sort of the measurement of that success. And as David Cho, you said about the different things that are in flight there. From all of your experiences, how do you go about tracking whether these programs are a success? Because it's all well and good putting them in place, but how do you actually ascertain whether they've been successful and had the desired results?
So I'll jump in there. So I think it's a combination of factors. It's not only measuring your year-over-year, addressable spend, but also looking at, as David Cho mentioned, the number of at-bats, right? And so we want to increase the number of opportunities that we're providing to our diverse suppliers. Increasing that number will then begin to embed that into our operations and drive more success. In addition to that, I think, as we're looking at the engagement across our organization, I think that's another factor in how we can bring opportunity and support various organizations around enabling small, diverse businesses as well. That's one of the factors, that we really want to focus on too, is really engaging our colleagues. Even if they don't have a need to buy, how can we support these businesses? So I think that sense of engagement has been a really important factor, coupled with, measuring our spend, also measuring the opportunities, the number of RFX opportunities that we provide.
If I can add to Melissa's point of view, and David, hearing your organization hitting 10%, right? I mean, those are terrific numbers. When we launched our procurement platform, we were at about 3.5% spend, and now we're closer to 7%. Last quarter was 8%. We want to certainly establish some hard targets that are in the double digits. But I think we're also looking at metrics such as tier 2 level spend, right? We want to see if the subcontractors, the supply chains, are also using the diverse providers, and so that has been very powerful, and it's something that's transparent to our users as well. So you don't have to change the buying behavior. The categorizations that we're tracking has also changed a bit. We didn't track LGBTQ-owned businesses, for example, and so that certainly motivated us to look at some of our data partners to look at those categorizations, and certainly just the sheer number of diverse suppliers that are part of the portfolio. So I think having those data analytics to power that visibility has been critical to make better business decisions.
And I think just building on what's been said already, I think we look at it in three broad ways, and I don't think any of it is really going to be earth-shattering. I think there's the obvious one of we look to grow our dollars with diverse suppliers. We look to measure the number of diverse suppliers in our supply base. I think the at-bats that was mentioned is really important too, isn't it? Because that can unearth a lot of really interesting questions about, we know these are great suppliers, we're not selecting many of them. Why is that? And it's almost certainly going to be a challenge for us, not for the supplier. It's going to be some internal biases and things. So I think that's all really important. We also look to grow our relationships with diverse suppliers for tomorrow, sort of development events. So we do track that as well. And then the third piece, which has been mentioned already, is the tier 2, of course. And I think my sense, if we can all get better at something, yes, we go to our large institutional suppliers and push them on tier 2, but I've got a sense that I think we can all be a lot more ambitious, is the nice word perhaps, aggressive might be a stronger word, I wonder if we can all get a lot better at challenging each other on tier 2. That's kind of where my sense is in terms of let's really look to influence our suppliers rather than just maybe just capture the data they come back to us with. Let's really push them on it. But they're the sort of broad 3 buckets that we report on.
Well, David, you've actually set up a question there that I was going to ask in a few minutes, but I'll jump to that now, and that is about, frankly, some useful advice for people about how they can get better at looking into the tier 2, tier 3 areas. From your experiences, what have been the best ways to actually lift the hood up and understand what those tiers are up to and how diverse they are?
I think in terms of tier 2, one of the approaches we've taken is, it's a part of an overall procurement category management strategy, right? So we have, like everyone else, a long tail of spend. And when you want to cut off that tail, shrink that tail of providers and consolidate and double down on strategic partners, and when you actually shift that business, so we've been able to, in certain cases, move millions of dollars of business to strategic partners that have earned it in a very short period of time, then you have that right to ask, and you have greater influence to be able to say, let's talk about these tier 2s, and let's formally make an announcement. So in the VAR space, this is the value-added resellers and technology, 2 of our key global partners, their C-level folks joined us. One was Connection and the other was CDW. CDW's CEO and I made the announcement, we will hit 20% tier 2 level spend, announced it publicly, but we focused on women, Black and brown businesses with a heavier presence in our geographic footprint in New England. So we got very specific. And I think for smaller businesses, one suggestion is, you have to get a client sponsor, right? Use their voice where you can promote your business as a viable partner with larger companies. So, when we make those types of announcements, now we're sending potential suppliers there to the way of our primaries. They institutionalize partnerships with them if they like what they see, and we're off, right? So in that sense, to David's point, just taking a risk, getting yourself out there, getting aggressive, and just making the announcements, again, after you've pre-socialized it with influencers within the buying community, that builds accountability. And, that's what I certainly enjoy, partnering with folks who like to take those calculated risks as well.
So I think one of the ways that we have been influencing tier 2 has really been to strategically bring together some of our core requirements and work with our enterprise level suppliers to really pressurize that system as far as our expectations are concerned. So expecting tier 2 reporting, that's kind of bare bones, base requirements for us. So trying to drive that behavior, and it's coupled with our expectations around environmental sustainability, and obviously, working through strong governance performance expectations as well. And so we've incorporated this criteria as part of our ongoing strategic agenda with these key suppliers. So that's been one of the ways, just on a practical basis, to really try to influence and drive that behavior and expectation, with our supply base.
I'd agree with everything really that David and Melissa have just said, and I think one way I'd look at it is that in many ways it's just smart procurement. Really, I think, like David said, building your relationships with strategic suppliers, consolidating your spend. That is smart procurement. I mean, that will get you to listen to them. If you really want to start pushing them on tier 2, and again, this is just smart procurement, there's always moments of leverage, isn't there? It's renewal times, it's other occasions that it's smart procurement, but you're using your smart procurement skills to drive a really valuable initiative, which is the tier 2. But I think if you just look at it through that lens of what's the smart procurement thing to do here, find those moments of leverage, consolidate your spend. That's when, tier 2 targets that they may have run out of the building about they're going to have to listen to it when it gets to renewal times, and there's definitely a win-win scenario like David was talking about. I think that let's take those risks, but it's really smart procurement is the tactic, I guess.
Yes, the magical power of renewal time. All kinds of amazing things can happen at that time. Sticking with the advice theme that we were with there for a second, we're talking here to organisations that maybe aren't as far along with their diversity procurement journeys as you all are. I'm sure in the time that you've been involved in it, you've encountered roadblocks, issues, blockers. What kind of things have you seen? What challenges have you seen? And how have you overcome them? And how can other people learn from that?
I think I was very lucky that with my founding story that I was talking about earlier on, what we didn't have as a blocker was C-level advocacy. We had a huge amount of C-level advocacy. That, of course, can bring challenges with it too, that they expect really dramatic results. But we certainly didn't have that, and that is, of course, essential. But even that, what that doesn't do, it won't embed supplier diversity practices across the business. You'll get lots of nodding heads from that throughout the hierarchy of the business, but you may not get action. And what I mean by that is that we had these really ambitious corporate targets, but I think, frankly, they were viewed by the business as just that. They were viewed as my targets, my supplier diversity team's targets. But crucially, the functions and the various business groups that do the spending ultimately didn't view them as their targets. So I think a really important step we took was C-level advocacy, great, ambitious corporate level targets, great, but you need to get those different business functions to have their own aspirational targets, get them signed off by leadership, and then you become their ally about, wow, it's great, you've got this aspirational target, we're going to be your best friend to help you hit that target. So I think that's really important, which in a way is really just utilising that C-level advocacy, because they kind of had to do it nearly because our C-level was so supportive. And then I think just quickly on a second one that we've had a challenge with is around decision making. And I've been a sort of blocker in this, really, essentially, that if someone asked me 5, 6, 7 years ago, what's the right way to do procurement, I'd be saying things like, go to all the sort of research that's out there, the Gartners, the Forresters of this world, look to see who's really well reputed, look to see who can do things for you globally, etc., etc. That's great on managing risk, but you're going to really struggle to find diverse suppliers. So I think that's been unpicking my own way of doing things. It's been unpicking the procurement team's way of doing things, but also across the business. And I think leaders are important there. And David mentioned it with the acceptable level of risk. You'll never succeed at supplier diversity unless you do change how you operate a little bit. And there has to be an acceptable level of risk about, yeah, well, you know what, let's try this. Let's try something new. And that's certainly been something that we've unpicked. And I love that at-bat target that Melissa was talking about, because if that's out of whack, that will kind of highlight that in a very simple metric, I think. That, why aren't we selecting these suppliers? We keep on going to the same old targets, and it may be because of issues like that. So there have been two challenges we've had to overcome.
Melissa, I'll come to you next.
Sure. So I think one of the challenges that we've had, is really the competing priorities that we see across procurement. Our team is constantly trying to balance some of these priorities and working with our business stakeholders around, wanting to continue to work with, a supplier that they've worked with for years, that they trust and know, and trying to get them to take that chance and, really kind of run that process where we can evaluate and look for opportunities for diverse suppliers and engagement there. I think that's probably been one of the biggest challenges, is trying to manage those priorities and then drive these processes to open open our stakeholders' minds to different choices in selecting new providers. I think that can be a really challenging aspect.
David Cho?
Yeah, you hear lots of reasons not to factor supplier diversity or get constant feedback about all the challenges that come with promoting the program, which is still better to hear the feedback than to hear absolute silence, as David alluded to, nodding heads. There are simply, attempts to avoid including this in the math of the calculations when considering a partner sometimes. And while we have many allies, sponsors, supporters, there was certainly quite a bit of pushback, right? And there, the questions could be, how do we know this is a diverse supplier? It's hard to find one in a particular area. Give me a list of them. I need to focus on cost. I need someone with a track record. I need a partner to scale. And I'll tell you what, when you're back to the leadership commentary that we just heard, when you're president, CEO, CFO says, figure it out. Let me know what you need because this is the right thing to do. That certainly changes the narrative a lot more. And some of those arguments can change to, well, how do we solution for it, right? So leadership matters a ton. One other method, I think, I kind of alluded to the evaluation criteria. Procurement is, part of the business of procurement, particularly in sourcing, is building that productive tension, that competitive spirit. So creating tension is part of the process. And I think creating a baseline where there's at least a watermark where supplier diversity stands in terms of how we weigh a partner and considering them through a competitive process or RFP. Meaning when you start framing an RFP process, right? The evaluation criteria are set at a default level, right? If we set that diversity weighting at 10%, for example, I mean, I've seen some very progressive companies set it at 20. If folks push back, I want to understand the rationale of why they feel supplier diversity weighting should be a rounding error. Have them, debate it, argue it, right? And at least you're having that discussion. And so I think it's changing hearts and minds, one incremental team or person or leader at a time, right? So there is a longer gestation process, but I think the view is definitely worth the climb.
And David, you've set me up perfectly for my final question to all of you here, and that's about looking to the future. David Latton, you spoke about aggressive and progressive targets as well. Is that the future? Is it just setting another set of targets afterwards, or what other things are going to be coming up in the future of this space? Where do you see things going?
Sorry, go ahead, David, please.
Oh, sorry. I mean, targets are great, of course, and aspirational targets are really great. But there's a pretty sketchy history in recent years of companies, society, industries setting aspirational targets and whether we hit them or not. But of course, they really do have a place. I think closer to where the rubber hits the road, some real topics that I've thought over the last few years is that there are many myths around supplier diversity that need to be dispelled, and we can all work together to do this. And if we can dispel some of these myths, that will immediately increase the sort of opportunities, the percentage of spend we have with these suppliers. Like, for example, I suppose one myth would be, there just aren't any diverse suppliers in category XYZ, so I have to go and work with whoever, blah, blah, blah. This is technically true in some areas, of course. I mean, to my knowledge, there is no diverse-owned airline, so that is true in some cases. But in the vast majority of cases, that isn't true. There are diverse suppliers there. There are great diverse suppliers there. Advocacy groups can help with that. But I think it's really important that all of us work together to do that, to dispel that myth. And one more qualitative factor we look to report on is exactly that point, really, that we have this vision and it's aligned with our beliefs that we want some of our most strategic suppliers to be diverse suppliers. These are going to be in categories that there's usually the myth around. You can't get a diverse supplier that can be your most critical kind of marketing supplier. Well, of course you can. If you look for them, they are there. If we don't find them, it's on us, not on them. So I think that's an area we can really work together. And when we have those successes, really share them. And then a really big topic that I won't go into it in depth because we haven't got the time, but I think lots of companies are starting to think about what this means beyond the US and doing it globally. We're there too. What that means globally is a really tough question, and how we can impact it globally is a really tough question. I think that's going to take a group effort too, but that's probably a topic for another call. But I'll leave it on those two for now.
David Cho?
Yeah, I think, to echo David's point, I think the target setting is healthy, right? We have had, we're fortunate, in that we've got wonderful faculty that and chief diversity officers that reflect the spirit of what our students want. We had one of our key partners, Dr. Neff Walker, join us in one of our town halls that was recorded and cascaded to our communities, providing a view of the why of supplier diversity and what it means to the university, and a lot more historical context than I would have ever considered. That subject matter expertise always helps provide a good background, and then we focus on the how, right? And being able to set a certain target, what's the playbook? So we've started to build this much more prescriptive playbook, but empowering. We're always trying to find folks that understand how to consume data, right? So there's a lot more data that we can harvest. How do you react to it? And I think being able to ensure that we're investing in people that understand how to respond to this information and put more playbooks together to figure out how do we provide the empirical evidence to change behavior, to motivate leadership, to double down and provide their influence and institutional equity to promote this kind of change, right? So there's a lot of subtleties. It's not just pure science. There's a lot of art behind it, I think. And, I like, certainly what I've heard from my peers here, just, different methods to influence when, this is an art we have to continue to hone, that influencing when we don't have any formal authority, right? There's just different levers that we have to use to get us to the outcome that we're striving for. So, I appreciate being, part of this discussion for sure.
Thank you, Dave. Melissa, I'll give you the final word on this.
Okay, so, obviously, I think one of the things we're looking to do is expand our program as well globally. We operate in 120 countries, and for us, it's looking about new opportunities. And certainly, it's not the same definition in every country in which we operate as far as a diverse provider. So we're looking for opportunities to expand, to support those programs, and what it means within that country or region to be a diverse provider. So I think that's one aspect. And the other, I think, which is very critical, is really helping to grow and develop diverse business and how we can help them build capacity. We see many of these organizations having, very small teams, right? You're talking about, one or two people at times. And so how can we help to invest in the infrastructure to drive and support these businesses and help them grow? Also helping in developing and mentoring, their ability to respond and work with large corporations and in a way that is going to be beneficial to both parties and helping them grow capacity and helping us also continue to grow our programs and tap into that innovation and agility. I can tell you during the pandemic, we had a key supplier who stepped up for us during that time when we were not able to meet certain requirements and obligations. And I think it was a prime example that we've used in articulating the benefits of working with these providers and how critical they are to delivering for our clients and colleagues. Yep. So I think those are a couple of key areas that we're looking for as far as future plans.
Yes, there are many, many benefits, and we could talk about those for the next half an hour, but I'm afraid we do have to move on. David and Melissa, thank you so much for your time and joining us here at Procurement and Supply Chain Live, New York.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed.